Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering 4 Lightroom editing tips when you're editing portraits. Editing portraits can be a really interesting task. Not only do you want to make the photo look as good as possible, but you also want to be flattering your subject and making sure that you're not removing anything they don't want removed, you're not keeping in anything they don't want kept in, and it's an accurate depiction and representation of the person. So without further ado, let's jump into Lightroom and cover these 4 portrait editing tips. Okay, so we're here in Lightroom, and as you can see, this photo is of me. Now, this isn't some crazy portrait that I took at like 85mm at f1.2. This was shot on the GH5 at 8mm at f2.8, sitting right here. We're using this photo because 1, it's of me, so I'm not gonna hurt anyone's feelings using a photo of someone else, and 2, it's really simple. There's basically nothing going on, and it shows you that regardless of the gear you shot with, you can use these tips when you're editing your portraits. So tip number 1 is to make sure you accurately depict the skin tone. Now, the skin tone is such a touchy, like kind of hard to nail thing, and that's why you've got to do your absolute best to nail it inside of your camera. So that is making sure the exposure is correct and the white balance is on point. Now, let's say your exposure and your white balance weren't on point. Well, how would you go about correcting that inside of Lightroom? So let's cover white balance first. You've got a few ways of correcting it. You can manually adjust it if you like. And by the way, I think I've basically nailed the white balance on this shot, so I don't need to like kind of make any changes, but we're gonna run you through this anyway. So like I said, you can manually adjust it with your eyes. Now, this way is a little bit hard to nail, but if you need to micro adjust, I'd suggest doing it this way. You can also use the white balance dropper and select a part of the image that's supposed to be pure gray, pure black, or pure white. So for example, let's say I came up to this just target on my shirt. As you can see, very small amount of change, but it accurately kind of represents the white balance that should have been used. And if that isn't working for you, you can always come back here, press auto, which definitely isn't working in this shot, or you can select from the kind of preset white balances they've got for you here. So like I said, I don't want to change any of the white balance in this photo because in my opinion, it is perfect. So now we're moving on to the exposure part of the skin tones. Now, this exposure panel is going to adjust the whole image, and that's fine. In a portrait shot, your main concern is how the person looks. So if you're kind of blowing out the highlights in the background a little bit, or there's some black clipping far off in the blurred out background, it doesn't really matter. So what you want to do is make sure you have quite a smooth gradient over the skin tone. As you can see here, there's some quite harsh light over my face. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start decreasing the highlights a little bit, and as you can see, that really evens out my face. I'm going to increase the shadows just a little bit, and then I'm also going to bring down the whites just a touch, I'm going to bring up the blacks just a little bit, then I'm also going to decrease the contrast a bit. So as you can see now, if we have a look at before and after, there's a lot less harsh light on my face. And while it might not be looking as good as the final product will be, it's a really good step in the right direction. Okay, so next up is very similar to tip number 1, but that is to make sure you are using the tone curve. Now, we want to make sure we're not going to ruin all the corrections we just made. So we're going to go pretty easy on the tone curve. But basically what we want to be doing here is I'm just going to be adding a very slight S-curve, but bringing down the highlights of the photo. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to decrease the shadows just a little bit. I'm going to increase the midtones just a touch. And now I'm just going to increase the blacks a little bit to add just a nice little fade over the image. Basically, it's just raising the blacks a little bit more. And as you can see there, we've got a nice little fade. So if we have a look at before and after, the skin tone is really starting to just get really nice and clean. It's not like clipping in one area, which is perfect. Now, this is the time where you can go ahead and do the rest of your edit. Instead, I'm just going to use one of my portrait presets because, well, it's going to speed up the editing process like crazy. If you guys want to check them out, they're currently on sale. Check out the link in the description. The Master Collection includes all the presets from here to here, and the colorways is a separate pack. But anyway, we're going to use the portraits for this one, and let's use maybe Portraits 2. That one's a bit rough. Portraits 2. I like this. Portraits 2 is great. Now for this, I'm just going to bring down the highlights just a little bit more, and that has also adjusted the tone curve just slightly. But now we're back to where we were. The colors have been corrected, and this is starting to look really good. So tip number 3 is we're gonna start looking at removing any distractions. Now, what I mean by this is not this Rode microphone in the top corner. I mean any distractions on the person's face. So I usually do this in Photoshop, but I'm gonna show you how to actually do it in Lightroom and not with the horrible spot removal tool that doesn't work. I'm gonna show you how to adjust that a little bit to make it actually work. But a rule that I have for when I'm taking things off people's faces or people's bodies is that if it's permanent, I leave it. So for example, let's have a look. Well, let's go to a 300%. So I've got this mole, this tiny like little mole on the side of my face. I'm gonna leave it because like that's not something that's just gonna heal, get better, or you know, if I've got like, I don't know, sauce or something on my face, which believe it or not, I do have sauce on my face in this photo, and that's what we're gonna remove. So we're gonna come up to the spot removal tool here, and usually it's on clone, and this clone thing is so bad. I don't understand. Adobe, you made Photoshop. The same people that made Photoshop made Lightroom and thought to ship Lightroom with the clone tool that is just dreadful. Like the clone stamp tool on Photoshop is amazing, but the clone tool on this is dreadful. So change that to heal, and now you've basically got the spot heal brush you would have had in Photoshop in Lightroom, which is perfect. So if we zoom in to 300% here, you can see I've got a little bit of sauce on my face after having lunch. I probably should have removed that, but in all honesty, it's kind of made good for the photo. But anyway, I'm gonna remove that, and that is that done. Fortunately, at the moment, I've been looking after myself, so thank you very much, Zach. And my skin's actually looking quite nice. I've also got this huge light here, just doing wonders for my skin. So that's awesome. And we're gonna move on to tip number 4. So for tip number 4, I'm gonna run you how to adjust the eyes to make them stand out a little bit more. I'm gonna show you how to whiten the teeth and how to soften the skin tone. And I promise you, this is probably the quickest thing we're gonna do all video. It's actually pretty cool. So let's go over the teeth whitening first. So as you can see, my teeth, at least right now, look pretty white, which is dope. But if I come over to this drop-down menu here and I select teeth whitening, I'm gonna make my brush nice and small, press O, and that's gonna show me where I'm gonna be painting. And I'm just gonna make sure, actually no, we're gonna deselect this. And this way we're gonna be able to see directly changes that are gonna be made to the teeth. And basically what we're doing here is we're using Adobe's preset brush masks that they recommend to use for teeth whitening that kind of look natural and good. Now, in my opinion, this looks way too white. And if I zoom out, like, yes, okay, it looks good, but I know that it is fake. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna come back here. I'm gonna increase the saturation a little bit, because basically what this is doing is decreasing the yellow or the orange hue saturation, and now it's looking a lot better. Now, the same thing goes for the eyes. I'm gonna open up the brush mask and I'm gonna hit effect, and we're gonna go iris enhance. Now this one, I might use the mask overlay because I don't wanna go outside of the lines, but as you can see there, we're just gonna paint over that eye, and it's now making them stand out a whole bunch more. And I'm gonna do the same over here. And as you can see, my eyes are looking just a little bit crispier and a little bit like they just stand out. And that should be the thing you're focusing on when you're taking a portrait. And then last but not least is the softening of the skin. So once again, we're gonna open up the brush mask and we're going to go soften skin light. And now we're gonna make the brush really big so it covers all of my skin tone, my face, a little bit of my arm and hands, and we're just gonna click. And we're gonna press O, and it's gonna show me the selected mask overlay. Now, as you can see, it's got like a little bit over the side. It's selected the whole area basically. But what we can do is we can come down to range mask, we can hit color, and then we can get this little dropper here and just drop it on my skin, and it's gonna take off a whole lot of the other kind of areas in the background. Now, we're gonna also just decrease the amount a little bit, because that way it's really gonna narrow in what we've just selected, and that's it. That is it. That we've just whitened my teeth, softened my skin, and increased the kind of like, enhanced my irises, as Adobe likes to say it. But now if we have a look at before and after, this portrait is looking great in my opinion, not only because it's of me, but because of all these tips we've used. So with these 4 tips, you should be able to edit your portraits a whole lot nicer and a whole lot cleaner. Don't go overboard when you're editing your portraits, because believe me, it stands out. So guys, that's gonna wrap up today's video. I hope you've enjoyed and I hope you've learned something. I hope you can take something that we've spoken about in today's video and put it into your workflow the next time you're editing portraits. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you're new around here, subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, guys, I will catch you in the next one. Peace.